So I'm going to begin. This is being recorded, so if anyone that you know has missed this event, they will be able to see it on our website in about a day or two. Not to worry. And then also, just for people to know, we have made up these holiday book buzz little bookmarks, and there are the list of books for not only adults, but also on the other side are the books that the children talked about, or the children's library and the children's bookseller there at Elm Street talked about last week. So hello and welcome to the Holiday Book Buzz. My name is Laura Woodward Cavers. I am here with Kathy Blantz, who is just wave Kathy. We are live from the library, and she is downstairs on the floor and in mask. So I'm squirreled away in an office. And we also have Manda Riggs of Elms Street Books, and she is safely at home, away from the Christmas shopping crowds of New Canaan, which has. So just some housekeeping for everyone. If everyone would please turn their view, if you go up into the right-hand corner of the black screen of your Zoom screen, you will see, if you hover your cursor over there, you will get a chance to change your view. If you were to change it to speaker, then what will happen is the person who is speaking will be the person whose screen will be the largest, and you will be able to see all of the books closely. As well, if you have any questions, we're going to be happy to answer any of your questions, but not until the end of the presentation. So please, at the bottom, you know where the Q&A is. Just go ahead and type in your questions there, and we will attend to them as soon as we have finished reading all of our books. So how we're going to do this is we're going to first talk fiction, then we're going to talk nonfiction. Let's see, I just want to make sure I'm doing my run of show correctly. First of all, Manda, do you want to tell people Christmas hours or any kind of Christmas news there at Elm Street?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for having us. It's always nice to have such a wonderful relationship with the library, which we continue to work towards great events together. Yeah, Christmas has been crazy. If anyone's been in the store yet this season already, we have our normal hours, which are Monday through Saturday, 9:30 to 5:30. And Sundays we're open noon to 5. Christmas Eve, however, we will be closing at 2 p.m. If I don't get my staff out of there by 2 o'clock, I hear a lot of complaining, and they're usually pretty exhausted by then too. And also just let you know, the way Christmas falls this year, we will be closed, as you know, on Christmas Day, thank goodness. But we're also going to be closed on Boxing Day this year, which is the 26th.
Oh, okay.
So we will not be open that day. We will reopen on Monday, the 27th. We will then be open through that following week until New Year's Eve, and we will be closed New Year's Eve this year. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and January 2nd. And then, so we have a little bit of break on either weekend, because as you know, during these crazy COVID times, it's a little exhausting for everyone, especially working in masks. So those are our holidays.
Yes.
As you know very well, yeah.
And
Kathy still knows. Poor Kathy still has her mask on.
I know. Yeah. So we do have holiday hours, and of course I do not have any of them here with me. Certainly Christmas Day and New Year's Day, we are not open. Kathy, can you help out with
we're closed on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day. So we're closed 24th, 25th, and 26th. New Year's Eve, we close at 3, and then we're closed New Year's Day.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to begin the books. So the first fiction book that I'd like to talk about is A Play for the End of the World by J. Chakrabarty. He actually came here to the library maybe 2 months ago to talk about this book. And for people for your holiday giving list, this book is for World War II readers, but with a twist. This is a story about art as resistance. The time frame shifts between the 1940s, World War II, Warsaw Ghetto, and the 1970s in New York City, where Jarek, survivor of the ghetto there in Warsaw, is now 40 years old and is reluctantly falling in love. His friend Misha, who also survived the ghetto and lives in New York City, goes to India, where he suddenly dies. And Jarek goes there to retrieve his friend's ashes. And what he finds in this city of Bolpur is an orphanage, much like the one he and Misha lived in Warsaw. And he becomes embroiled in the turbulent time of the Bangladeshi diaspora pouring into India at the time. It's an absolutely beautifully written book, very reminiscent kind of style of writing. The Play for the End of the World, the title of the book, is in fact a true work of Polish Jewish educator doctor known in history as Pan Doktor. And he had the children of the orphanage in Warsaw perform this as a way to teach them how to persevere through dark times. And so what Jay has done is taken this very same play, brought it to light, let everyone know about this, and is bringing it to India, where there is just as much oppression and kids having to survive. It's a very lyrical story, reimagines the two survivors that bring the play to another orphanage in the time of upheaval. It's a history that's not known, and I think anybody who really enjoys a different type of World War II history that actually lives forward, this is a really great book. The next book I'd like to talk about are actually 3 books, but the first one I'll talk about is Sunflower Sisters. And maybe many of you have already read this book because it was our Lit Lunch author, Martha Kelly, was here. And but I really want to, for people trying to fill out their lists of gifts for people, is that this is a wonderful story. What Martha Hall Kelly has done is gone to a lovely museum in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and found diaries of some magnificent women who have done wonderful things for many people who have had to had a lot of adversity in their lives. And this book is about the Civil War. The Lost Roses is about the Russian imperialism. These are such big books. It's funny how I'm trying to juggle them. And this book is about the women, the Polish Jewish women who were interred in the the hospitals of the concentration camps, and were experimented on. And what is amazing about this, why I think that this would be great, these 3 books, 3 very big books. If you have a historical fiction reader on your list, these are wonderful books. These are about a family, the Faraday family in Bethlehem, Connecticut. It's generational of all the wonderful things that they did for the people in the Sunflower Sisters were abolitionists, and in that story you learn a lot about the Civil War of the border states, as well as what the Civil War was like in New York City, and the free the Black people that would come up hoping for freedom, but they could be yanked right back down to the South. In Lost Roses, I did not read this one. It's about the imperial princesses who were not were forgotten in history. And then the Lilac Girls, as I said, is about World War II. And they lived, once they were let go from the concentration camps, they were brought to this place in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and rehabilitated there. So all 3 books are, I think, a wonderful gift for anyone who loves historical fiction, who loves strong women, and who also loves a little bit of Connecticut history. So those are really, really great books. The next one that I'm going to tell you about is Clara and the Sun. This is the story of Clara, an artificial friend, i.e. she's a robot. And she has outstanding observational qualities. We meet her from her place in a store. She watches carefully the behavior of those who come in to browse the selections of artificial friends and of those who pass the store on the street outside. She remains hopeful that a young teen customer will soon choose her, and a young girl named Josie does and takes Clara home. Clara observes Josie, the girl's family, and Josie's friends, and how they treat each other and themselves. While I read the book, Clara and the Sun does not appear to be set in the far future. It is a tale of just what could be as early as tomorrow. What I observed is how Clara moves toward nature for replenishment, that she finds, and in a way she finds spirituality and the meaning where humans, it's an interesting, as they are together, but then as Clara and moves more toward the sun and therefore gets a little bit more spiritual, whereas humans are just not. They're in the machine world. That's where they're going, is in the machine world. And it's I think, Ishiguro's comment on what he's possibly seeing happening in the world today. So that would be, I think it's a great book for book groups to talk about the meaning of the book, or for anybody who enjoys thought-provoking stories that can be very unsettling in their simplicity. And then here is another book, The Beautiful World, Where Are You? By Sally Rooney. It's a story of 4 people, Alex, Felix, Eileen, and Simon, and they are still young, but life is catching up with them. They desire each other, they delude each other, they get together, and then they break apart. The women are friends from childhood, and they write to each other, the good, the bad, the ugly, and mainly about themselves. Sometimes about the men in their lives, but also about the world as they see it and as they are reluctantly are having to inherit. So this is part epistolatory story, part conversation. Beautiful World, Where Are You? Is a great storytelling device that gives a glimpse into the world of like the 20 to 40-year-olds. So if you do have someone on your Christmas list that is in that age range, they might really enjoy this. It's a question, it questions a lot about where society is right now. And there's a lot of hope in the book. It's a real easy book to read. It's lovely. You get into their lives. It's nice. And so those are my fiction choices. Let's see, Amanda.
Yes.
You are next.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you again for having me. And thanks everyone who shopped at Elm Street Books already this season. We have an enormous number of wonderful books for the Christmas season. I chose my 4 fiction books really based on the people that you're probably buying for. My first choice, for those of you who are Elizabeth Strout fans, is O. William. This is Lucy Barton is the protagonist. You do not have to have read any of the other books in order to read this. You can literally pick it right up and read it. It's definitely a standalone. This is really for your mother, your mother-in-law, your grandmother, any female in your family. I think it resonates very female, I have to say. But the crux of the story is basically Lucy Barton has been divorced from her husband, William, for quite a while. He has a new wife and has had a child by that wife. Long story short, William decides he is having a midlife crisis. He contacts Lucy. He wants to start finding a family member that he believes exists, but he's not entirely sure. And he kind of knows that she's good at research and she's a sympathetic ear to him. Meanwhile, he's also having trouble in his marriage, which she comes to find out. And so they basically embark on a road trip and to find this long lost sibling. I think really in contemporary literature, Elizabeth Strout writes people better than anyone, in my opinion. She can write in such a simple nature and capture the essence of all the characters in the book. It's sad, it has a bit of maudlin to it, but again, I think it's the perfect book for the kind of women in your life, so to speak, or at least some of the difficult women to buy for. For my next choice, now please forgive this. This is a galley. This is not available in paperback, but I did not get the hardcover when I left today. So I know I'm going to get people in the store saying, wait, I think it's in paperback, but it's not. It's brand new. It's the new John Franzen. This is for the snob on your list. This is for the person that tells you that every book you've ever given them is drudgery. It's not smart. It's not literature. Well, John Franzen is here to deliver the goods this Christmas. This book is called Crossroads. It's a wonderful well, it's not multi-generational yet, but it's a family drama. The town minister, the town priest, is the main character and the father figure. He has 3 children and is married also, of course. It is in the late 60s. He is enduring his own kind of crisis in faith. The youth minister that has been hired is very hip and now. He appears in his bell bottoms with his long hair, and he entices everyone to the church, something that the main character could not do of his own right. So he's not happy about that. Meanwhile, the eldest son is in divinity school and he's deciding perhaps he is losing his faith. The middle child, who is a daughter, is in love with the youth minister. So you can imagine the problems that ensues for the family. And the baby of the family, who's kind of the shyster, who seems to always have a lot of money because he's basically selling pot to everyone he knows and doing all these really uncouth things, especially for PK's son. He's the one that actually ends up finding religion. So it's fascinating. Now, I was a little daunted because, as you can see, it is quite long. And this is the first of 3. So I'm not sure how you feel about that, but it's a little, anyway, there are 2 more coming. So once you get this one done in about a year, the next one will be out next Christmas. My next book is for your dad or your mom or anyone in between, grandparents alike. This is the thriller on my list. It is super exciting. This is Ken Follett's new book, Never. I'm not a newer Ken Follett fan. I'm actually an older Ken Follett fan, but I have to say I picked this one up because I was intrigued by the cover of the book, and long story short, it does not disappoint. It is a female president. It is a female CIA agent. It is a spy that's working with jihadists. It's also a Chinese spy, and we're on the brink of World War III in this book. And I hate to say there are some eerie similarities, but there are. China is definitely the bad guy in this thing, but they're not bad people. It's just this is the country we're going to war with potentially. It's excellent. We have plenty of them. It's also fat and it's red for Christmas, which I always like. I think that makes for a good Christmas gift. So Ken Follett, Never. And my last fiction choice was kind of I shouldn't say a surprise, but it was a bit of a surprise because it was so funny. It is the one pandemic novel I would recommend at the time. There are many out there. I think everybody and their brother was writing a pandemic novel. The new Louise Erdrich is also very, very good, but serious. Gary Steingart has always been one of my favorite authors. He is he just always has a great contemporary commentary on our lives at the moment. And this is the story of a guy who is a Russian lit professor, his wife, who's a psychiatrist. She is also Russian, and their friends who have come to the country, upstate New York, to their compound, right as COVID is kind of descending on us, when we were all still traveling and thinking, well, how bad can this really be? And they all show up at his property for a long weekend, which actually lasts a little bit longer than that. But it is hilarious. It is ridiculous, truly in the sense of the word. And if you want something that is very smart and very literary, but also very, very funny, I think this is that book on the list. So those are my fiction choices. And
all right, I guess I'm up.
You're up.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I have a real mixed bag here, but I'm going to start with the lightest one, and that is the plot. Now, I know this has been very, very popular with a lot of our book groups. It gets a lot of play, and it's not the sort of book I usually go for. I tend to lean towards the heavier, the more I won't say dark, but maybe more serious. But the writing is excellent. The story is incredible. And I really can recommend this more to anyone who's looking for somewhat of a fun, light read. Basically, the main character is the author, Jacob Finch Bonner. He had a wonderful first novel. He did really well. Now he is not doing so well. And he is teaching at sort of a third-rate MFA program. He's frustrated. His second novel didn't do well. He's trying to write a third one. And along comes this arrogant writing student who is pushing all his buttons, but he happens to mention what he's writing, and it's an amazing plot. So years go by. Jacob keeps looking for this book to be published. He can't find it anywhere. And he does a little Googling and finds out that this young man has died. So what does he do? He steals the plot. He steals the plot, he writes the book, he becomes famous, but then someone finds out that he stole the plot and it all catches up with him. It's very, very well done. The author is Jean Hanff-Korelitz. She has written some other books that are excellent. And based on this, I think I'm going to seek out some more of hers. Now, my second choice is this lovely, lovely small book called Zori. Now, Zori was a finalist for the National Book Award. It's written by Laird Hunt. He is a very well-respected and much awarded author. He is from the New England area. And this particular book is it's the story of a woman's life. Zori grows up in 1930s Depression era Midwest in Indiana. She is raised by a very cold and unloving aunt. She basically has no family. And once the aunt dies, she goes out on her own to seek a living. Part of the story involves the, I guess you could call it the Radium Girls. If you remember the book, The Radium Girls. She makes great friends with a bunch of young women working in a factory. And they, unfortunately, are licking their brushes as they paint this radium paint on the dials of clocks. So, you know, down the road, that's going to catch up with them and will lead to a lot of illness and cancer. But along the way, she marries, she lives on a farm. It's really just the story of a very quiet and beautiful life. And I'm going to sum it up the way the New York Times described it, because actually that is the way I think of it. The reviewers said that it's really the story of America in the 1930s, stalwart, hardworking, leaning on their neighbor, getting by and trying to make the best of everything. So it really is a beautiful book, and I highly recommend this. Third book that I'm going to talk about is something that our director, Lisa Oldham, kind of pressed on me, because sometimes we read the same. And this is called A Passage North. It is by, and excuse my pronunciation, it's Anak Arudpragasam. He is the author of The Story of a Brief Marriage, which also got a lot of literary notice. Reading it is like a meditation. This is for someone who really loves detail, and it's not flowery. The detail is very quiet and beautifully written, but it is a story of family and of love of romantic love, familial love, also love of country. It's a young man who's traveling to the north of Sri Lanka. He lives in the south. And he is going to the funeral of the woman who took care of his grandmother for many years. It's set against the backdrop of the 30 years civil war of Sri Lanka, which I'm sad and embarrassed to say that I don't have much knowledge of and didn't, but you learn a lot about it in this book. So if you're giving a book to someone who loves history, would like to know more about another country, and loves beautiful, beautiful writing, this is the book I recommend. This was a finalist for the shortlist for the Booker Prize. It did not win, the Promise one, but I can see why it was a finalist. It was just beautiful. The next fiction book is Things We Lost to the Water. This is a story, again, of loss, familial loss, and also loss of country. It is a family who arrives in 1979 to New Orleans as a refugee from Vietnam. And interestingly enough, the word, and I'm going to pronounce this as best as I can, Nhok, is the Vietnamese for country and for water. So obviously, with the great mass of refugees that arrived after the war, there was a great loss of country, of identity, of familiarity. And the water that brought them there is also the way that they lost their country. So this book, I don't want to say this is sad. There's a lot of solemn moments, but there's a lot of, there's some humor in it, and there is also a lot to think about. So Things We Lost to the Water. Eric Nguyen, that is the author. The last fiction is an author we probably all know very well, Jhumpa Lahiri. This is Whereabouts. Whereabouts is really, it's really like having an intimate conversation with a good friend. It's about a woman, she's probably in her 40s. I suspect it's a small town in Italy. She doesn't specify this, but she did translate this book from the Italian to English. She wrote it in Italian. And it goes about her daily life, her coffee shops that she visits, the friends that she has. There is a man, it's always referred to as he. She doesn't really specify much about him. But it's a portrait of urban solitude. It's punctuated by casual relationships, coming and going. There's a couple with a child she's very friendly with. And it shows her desire for connection, but yet her rejection of connection. So it is very interesting. I couldn't put it down when I started it. It's a short read, it's a small book, but it's a real little gem. And if you like the writing of Jhumpa Lahiri, you will love this book. So I recommend it for that. And now I'm going to segue into nonfiction, my one nonfiction pick. And after this, Laura and Amanda will come back with their nonfiction. This is a book called Made in China. Made in China, an SOS letter and the hidden cost of America's cheap goods. Amelia Pang. She's a journalist, and it's her expose of the enforced labor prison camps in China and how the work of the, I would say inmates, but most of them are in there for no good reason. They have been dissidents, perhaps they followed another religion than the state sanctions, or they might have been involved in the scholastic world, academia, but they're in prison and they're being used to produce cheap goods. So what happens is one morning, and I must say this is not an urban legend, this really did happen. One morning, a young woman in the Midwest opens up a package of Halloween decorations, and in it is an SOS letter by a man who is being captured. His name is Sun Yi, and he is in this prison camp, and in his plea for help, he's asking whoever finds this, please take it to the World Human Rights Organization and help us. So she cannot forget about this, and she does just that. She seeks out help. And this is the journalist Amelia Pang's expose of what is happening, how it happens, and how, in a way, the consumption of consumer goods that we, as all of us do, buy from places like Target and Walmart and Home Depot, and actually some companies you would not consider, such as the American Doll, such as H&M, Zara. Many of these companies produce their goods in these labor camps. Some are aware of it and some are not. It's sourced out so many times that many companies are not aware that this is even happening. But this is fascinating. It's eye-opening, and it's really a great nonfiction read. Where Amelia Pang, the author, is going to be speaking via Zoom for New Canaan Library on January 27th. So we've just booked her, and I was going to let you know that, Amanda. So
awesome.
I'm going to order some extra copies, but from that moment, I'm going to transfer this over to Amanda and more nonfiction.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
That's a great, wow, I'm so psyched that you're having her come.
Yeah,
I know I
I'm
have a couple copies of it in the shop, and I put some more on order when I saw that you were talking about it. And now I will definitely need them because you'll be having the event. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Of course. All right. So I will launch into my nonfiction picks. I just have 3. My first one is a very personal pick because he's a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, I should say. And it is Travels with George by Nat Philbrook. Again, please forgive, it is not in paperback. It is new. It is in hardcover. This is the galley, which I happen to have. And I should have, like I said, grabbed the hardcover so you don't think it's in paperback. But I've known Nat for a long time, 20 something years, probably now, almost 25. And he is a resident of Nantucket, as I know many of you travel to that island. He lives there with his wife, Melissa, who is a lawyer. And they spent well, the funny thing is that, as he has always said, they moved to Nantucket so she didn't have to commute to her job. And then ironically, he became the traveler because he won the National Book Award for one of his books. He writes wonderful, incredible history books. Many of you have probably read over the years, but this is his newest one. And so the two of them decided to go on a road trip, to speak of. And this is basically to recreate the travels that George Washington made after he became president in 1789, right? Yeah, I always want to make sure my date's right. He became president in 1789. The country was completely at odds with each other, which sounds eerily reminiscent. And that's what Nat kind of found out as he started traveling up and down the eastern seaboard. He recreated the route from Portsmouth, Maine, all the way to Savannah, Georgia, and then coming back up and around through some of the more eastern southern states or southern towns as well. There's a map in here, you'll see. But he basically recreated George Washington's trip and found some really interesting, fascinating details about Washington's life. He regales us with just so many things that I just had absolutely no idea about. Like, first of all, like just one little takeaway, he was in Monticello, and which of course was Thomas Jefferson's home. He has a bust. They have a bust of Thomas Jefferson right across from the bust of Alexander Hamilton. And for those of us who are all Hamilton fans now, we all think we know so much about Alexander Hamilton. The two of them are glaring at each other, and Nat said it was kind of a funny experience to witness these two busts, and in his brain he's like processing all of this because they were rivals in many ways. And as we know, Hamilton was killed by Jefferson's vice president, right? Yes. So long story short, though, what's fascinating about this is that, Jefferson was reviled for having slaves. And it's now come to pass that Alexander Hamilton also had slaves, at least one that we know of. So this was something that came out of the book that I didn't necessarily know about. So it's just a great book. It's kind of, there's a bit of humor in it. He's not necessarily a funny guy, but this has some humor in it. So for those of you who are just pure American history buffs, I try to hand sell this to everyone that I know, that I see that comes in and asks me about it, because I do think it is a wonderful piece of our heritage, and he's just an excellent writer. Flip-flopping to contemporary times, my next choice is the Will Smith bio. I am a product of the 80s. I grew up with Will Smith. I listened to his rap music, and I was allowed to because he did not curse. And as you are aware of, if you have children of any age really that listen to rap music, it is riddled with cursing. Will Smith's grandmother told him that if he was going to become a rap star and he was going to write rap music, that he had to do it without cursing. And if he could do that, then he was a very smart boy. And that's what he did. He has never cursed in one of his songs. Now, of course, we don't really know him for rapping anymore. He's more of a major blockbuster movie star, and actually didn't even start out that way. He actually started out in small independent films. 6 Degrees of Separation was one of his early films. And he was kind of a character, you thought he was going to have this very interesting career, and then he became this big celebrity. So, but what's interesting about this book in particular is his roots. As I said, his grandmother was very instrumental in his early career and kind of guiding him in terms of how he decided to become a rap, how he rapped, I should say. His mother, was the superintendent of schools for South Philadelphia. She was horrified when he announced to her and his father that he was not going to college, he was going to be a rap star. Can you only imagine? But needless to say, they gave him 1 year. They gave him a free year, and in 1 year he won a Grammy. So I think he did a pretty good job. And then, of course, like I said, it launched his career. just interesting, fascinating vignettes. Most all celebrity bios are written by someone else. And in this case, it's written by ghost written, I should say, or written in combination with Mark Manson, who many of you know because he wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a but he's a very good and very interesting and hip writer. And I think that this book reflects that. And I think he was the perfect choice from an editorial standpoint to co-write, or however, I don't know how they give him credit on this, but he's got it on the flap. So they're definitely not hiding it. It's not ghost written. Anyway, so for anyone who is like me, who grew up in the 80s, I think it's a great choice. It's also just a really good bio, and there are not a lot of those out there. There are a lot of really junky bios, I will have to say. My last book is also written by a musician, but one that won the National Book Award, and who I think is sublime in her own way. She predates me a tiny bit, but I was a Patti Smith fan. This book is actually a re-release or an update, I would say, of the same book, but it was written as a Hand and Human book, which is this tiny little book that like fits into your pocket. It was kind of a thing in the early 90s, and a lot of people who were poets put some of their poetry, and if they were contacted by this publisher, this is her reissue of that, which I love. This cover, I have to say, with the clouds. I don't know if you can see it. It is in paperback. This is actually in paperback. It's the perfect stocking stuffer for any cerebral person you have, or non-cerebral person. I'm giving it to my 20-year-old son. Hopefully he's not watching this, who is a poet in his own right, quietly. And long story short, it is a lot of poetry that she wrote as a younger person, a lot of poetry she wrote as an adult. She has suffered mightily from depression, and she finds that writing things that come from memory of her childhood have kind of pulled her out of those depressive spells. There are lovely photographs in it. There are drawings that she has done. And so, I mean, I don't know what to say. This is kind of book you kind of leave by your bedside table, and in the middle of the night, like, unfortunately, I have this problem a lot. At about 2 a.m., I crack it open, and they're very small vignettes, so you can read for about 10 minutes, and it's just comforting in many ways. So we have a big stock of these at the store, so I hope you'll stop in and pick one up. And that's my last nonfiction choice. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Those were really great choices. I can't wait to read Philbrick's book. I have somebody I'm going to give that to. Okay, so I know no one wants to talk about the pandemic. I'm sorry I'm bringing this book up. But I really found this a very, very interesting book. And it's by Michael Lewis. It's Premonition. He writes so easily, and it's so facile about concepts that he's grabbing for you to help you understand just the intricacies of whether it's politics or business or social pressures or whatever it is. He really does take a way of speaking, of writing about something so that you can grasp where he's coming from and his reason for writing Premonition. Those of you who just Michael Lewis, he's a very well-known author. He's written Liar's Poker, The Flash Boys, Moneyball. A lot of his books have turned into movies. It's really Premonition is his newest book, and he actually wrote it early in the pandemic, because his big question is, why were we so flat-footed at the beginning of the pandemic to fight this? Why was our response so slow? And he said there had been outbreaks that the CDC and the NIH and the World Health Organization, Ebola, as well as AIDS, as well as SARS, and all of those had already been something that the world had been dealing with and been fighting, and they should have had, with this pandemic, the COVID, why was it something that was so hard to get a positive, forceful response forward? And so he goes into, does a lot of research, and he finds a local health officer who is in California, and she's responsible for a certain region of California. And why he finds her is because she was the first one, I think even before what was happening up in Washington, that was rattling the cages of her county, saying there's something happening in our county. There are people getting sick and we don't know what this thing is. And the county wouldn't listen to her, and the state didn't listen to her, and things just kept growing and getting worse and getting worse. And it was something that when he was interviewing her, he found that she just said, this is unfortunately how our health system, the alert system, is broken. We alert people, but they don't want to listen. And he writes this painful, what she had to go through, all until finally she was able to be heard. But it was after a lot of people were getting sick. He also finds a 13-year-old girl who has presented her science project. And her father, during the pandemic, he is hearing his daughter's science project, which is actually studying the transmission of pathogens. And he's looking at his 13-year-old daughter's presentation. He says, this is needed. This is needed right now. And sure enough, CDC, NIH, they all get together and they're like, wow, we can really use this bit of information. It was a 13-year-old girl. So there's all these types of stories that Michael Lewis finds, and always with the question, why? Why were we not so better prepared for this? He writes about unsung heroes, many more in it, that where, because the pandemic was getting worse, they defied their directives, and they ignored misinformation and bad science, and they got all their information to the people at CDC, at NIH, and told them the importance what they had found. It's fascinating and an easy read. It's a really, really easy read. So I'm sorry about the pandemic, but it's fascinating. It really is a very good book. The next book is, again, I'm coming with more than one or two books, and here's two. This is a book you may recognize. I wanted to bring this up because this has been out for a while. It's called The Blue Zone Kitchen. And this is what has just been brought into the library. I think it came out a few months ago, but it's the Blue Zones Challenge. And what the Blue Zone is, it's Dan Buettner is the writer of this. And in 2005, he wrote an article that was featured in the National Geographic. And that title was The Secrets of a Long Life. He is the originator of the Blue Zones, of which he has studied. He's gone around the world and studied people who, regions of the world. He's found them, there are 5 of them, found where people live over 100. It's routine that people live over 100 years of age. And so he wanted to study, kind of in an anthropological way, how they're doing that. What is it that they do that's different than everyone else? And he's created the Blue Zone Society, or the Blue Zone Organization. And he writes about these places. The 5 places are, just to let you know, Sardinia, which is a large Italian island in the Mediterranean, Okinawa, a Japanese island. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Ikaria in Greece, and Loma Linda in California. And all of these books that he has written, and this is one, and this is his latest one, all discuss lifestyle, exercise, and food. And I thought that this was, with the new year coming and everyone who, interested in resolutions, but this is just a good book to have on your shelf. These are recipes inside, lovely pictures, but also recipes for you. He also discusses all of his findings about lifestyle, the kinds of oils that people are using, olive oil, there are many different kinds of olive oils, and then capers opposed to olives, opposed to other vegetables. It really gets into the superfoods that he has found that most of these regions, that is what they eat primarily, mostly they keep that in their diet. And then what their lifestyle is, which is actually, and you can possibly believe this, it's mostly stress-free. That is what a lot of the people they're working, but they keep their lives as stress-free as possible. So it's been an interesting book that I have looked at over the year that we have had it. This is the new one, and it's called The Challenge. And it's actually a 4-week plan for a longer, better life. And I've not really looked into it, but I thought it was actually a good idea, and I wanted to let everyone know about it. We have it here at the library, but possibly there is someone on your list that someone who believes in food health and healthy living and all that. They might really be interested in trying to do the challenge, or they might want to come in and get the kitchen recipe book with a lot of the suggestions that he has found in all of his research. So that is the end of my nonfiction book selections. I just wanted to let everyone know, to remind you, we have these listed on these little bookmarky like things. We have them at the library. I know Amanda has some at the Elms Street Bookstore. So if you want to just pick this up, and you'll always have it to refer to, please feel free to do that. I'm opening up for questions if anybody has any questions, or if anybody has a suggestion of a great book that they think someone might enjoy giving as a gift to someone, please let us know. I mean, Amanda, Kathy, and I, we love to talk about books, and we love to know about other books too. So can I post the full list in the chat? Oh, thank you for saying that question. What I am going to do, I cannot put it into the chat. I have it anyway, for mechanical reasons, I cannot. But anyone who is registered in this program will be receiving this list via email tomorrow. I will be creating that. So you will be getting it in an email tomorrow. If you miss that, or if you see one of these that are at the library or in the bookstore, feel free to take one.
We have them right at the front desk, just to let everyone know. So thank you for bringing us those. I was going to actually ask a question to each other. What was your favorite book of 2021?
Wow.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was just like, well, maybe, because we don't necessarily talk about our favorite book, but maybe you did.
I didn't. Well, that's a tough one. I should have thought of that ahead of time.
I know, it was so terrible.
I was just like thinking of it. I was like, oh, well, I'll tell you what mine was, and then you can think about yours. How's that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I actually, interestingly, I just want to tell all the panelists that we were, the three of us, Kathy and Laura and I, were speaking prior to the call, or the Zoom rather, and we were talking about, I already said, I think I've read the best book for next year. Well, what's fascinating is that last year I had already read my favorite book in October or November that didn't come out until after Christmas, and it's called The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead.
Oh yeah.
And I think it is, well, it was shortlisted, or actually I think it was long listed for the Booker. I know it was long listed for the National Book Award. She got a lot of recognition, just no prizes, but she is a Wallace Stegner Fellow. Wallace Stegner is my favorite author of all time. The Angle of Repose is my favorite book, which most people can't really come up with their favorite book, but I do. Anyway, long story short, it's a wonderful book. We have a big stack of them at the store. And today I put it in everybody. It was like when you check out at the grocery, and I happen to be on the sales floor because I don't get that privilege much anymore because I'm in the back of the store. But I literally handed it to all these different people as they were, it was like gum. when you check out, you know, you hit the gum and the People magazine. And then I was like, here, take this tome of literature. But it is an incredible story of a woman who was an aviator. It's fiction, I should say. It was an aviator. She, basically in the 30s, she had to dress as a man because, of course, women weren't allowed to fly planes or were not taken seriously at all. And she was a bootlegger in part of the book. She ends up basically, she wants to fly so badly that she marries this man who she's not in love with, who was someone who was running a lot of goods at that time during Prohibition. And so she gets the he buys her a plane to transport his booze. And so she's like, fine, I'll marry you if I can fly. And but then it evolves into she becomes a fighter pilot in World War II. And it's just incredible. And there's a little bit of Amelia Earhart woven into it a bit. Maggie Shipstead said that she got the idea for the book. She was in the Sydney airport, and there was a female aviator that's very famous apparently in Australia. She saw this statue and she was like, oh, wait, female aviator, how interesting. And so she kind of went with that. And actually more interesting, I think, is really the beginning of the book, which is basically her father, she was a twin in the book, the main character. Her father was the ship's captain of a enormous, what am I trying to say? Like passenger liner, like a Titanic type ship that has a terrible accident. It runs into a rock, not an iceberg, and it has an explosion and it kills a lot of people. And the captain at the time, at the turn of this, like right at 1910, the law in the U.S., maritime law, was that if you were a ship's captain, you had to go down with the ship, and if you did not, it was a crime. And so he rescued his babies, which were on board. He happened to be making passage across with the wife, who did not want to be a mom, who jumps off the boat or goes down with the boat. He is left to make that decision. Like, do I go down with the boat like I'm supposed to, or do I rescue the babies? He rescues the babies, and then he spends the rest of his life in prison.
Oh my.
The two children are sent to live, the two babies are sent to live with his brother in Wyoming or Montana, somewhere out west. And that's where they grow up. It is so good. So if you haven't read it, Laura, you got it.
Well, okay. So I actually am going to plug O. William, because I had been doing a lot of reading, and O. William was like this breath of fresh air. Her writing style and what she was writing about was actually people about my age, you know, and just time of life. And she just wrote so clearly. Even though she's in her mind and confused sometimes, it's very clear, or maybe I can understand that confusion. And so that was one of my favorite books that I read. Another one that I'm going to plug that actually has not been talked about, but it's actually Laird Hunt. His earlier book, one of his earlier books, Never Home, was published years ago. I would say maybe a decade ago. Never Home, his writing is beautiful. You're just taken away. And yet Never Home is about the Civil War. So you're in battle, or you're in this situation that is fraught. But his writing and how he explains, it's a story about a husband and wife, and the wife is the one that dresses up, talking about dressing up as a man and fights the war because she cannot tend to the farm. He can tend to the farm, and she also is actually a good shot. But it's her writing home to him, and it's these stories of longing, and the husband, like, why are you at home? But he can do the farming and keep the farm. I mean, they're dirt poor people. They're trying. But it's just so beautifully written. And I've never forgotten Laird Hunt. Never forgotten. And so when Kathy said, "Oh, I'm reading Laird Hunt's Zori," I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to get that book." Ding, ding, ding. So just really, really lovely. And I just wanted to say, I just opened up the Paper Place, and I may be
Paper Palace.
Excuse me. Yes. Paper Palace. I wrote it down. Paper Palace. Oh my gosh, what a you kind of go along and then whoa, wow. It's a very interesting book. I'm only in like page 70 and I can't wait to get home and read it.
Well,
Really.
there's a fascinating little story about that. There is a nonfiction book that kind of goes along with this called The Upper Bohemians, I believe is the name of it, not Greater Bohemians, Upper Bohemians, which is written afterward by her aunt. And apparently they do not want any connection made between the two stories. So it's always fascinating to me when this happens, when fiction kind of takes on a greater life than nonfiction, when in fact, maybe then of course, in this case, the nonfiction book was released and someone made the connection. And apparently online, there was this whole like fight between the family over it. And it's it's crazy. So, but that book is fantastic. We sold that very, very well, especially with the New England, the Massachusetts and the Cape connection. Paper Palace. It's crazy. And it's really,
it is crazy
to the building where the mice are consuming it because it's made out of such junk.
Made out of paper.
It's made out of like whatever, the cellulose or whatever in this. That's a great book. I agree. That was one of my favorites also this year.
And then just to go on about Martha Hall Kelly, I heard her speak years ago when she had just put out Lilac Girls. Anyone who wants to become a writer, anybody who is interested, thinks that they have a story to tell or that they have a novel in them, she's always said, you get down and write that story, because she went just as a luncheon time with her friends up to this place in Bethlehem, Connecticut, the Faraday House. And she saw the diaries and they just spoke to her. And she then, she kept thinking about them as she went home, and she called the next day and she just said, can I come and read all the diaries? And they said, sure, come along. And so she did. And she says, I want to write their stories. And she was not a writer before. She just was consumed by this. And so anyway, I just let people know that other part about Martha Hall Kelly. And it's just really interesting historical fiction. And then one last thing, tomorrow I have another book talk on my book chat. And tomorrow I have an author coming by. Her name is Eileen Garvin.
Oh, excellent. That's excellent.
Music for Bees. And she's coming. This was a big winner over in the Pacific Northwest. She is a beekeeper. This takes place in Oregon. If you are, so many people come into the library and say, I just want a nice book to read. I don't want turmoil. I don't want war. I just want a nice story.
Lovely story. Yeah.
Really nice story.
I love that book. Melissa Thorkelson loved this book. This was one of her favorite books of the year.
Yeah. And so she's coming tomorrow. Well, not coming. I'm Zooming with her tomorrow on Book Chat. So if you want to hear about Music for Bees and a lot about beekeeping and a lot of, I'm looking forward to, because it was just like, oh, this is such a good story. I'm just going to sit down and enjoy my time here with Eileen Garvin. So that's what we have. Kathy, I'm sorry. I guess you're helping someone downstairs we've been playing desk tag because she's, there she is.
Oh,
thank you, Kathy.
Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it.
Amanda, thank you so much. Everyone,
thank you so much.
Coming. Thank you for coming. I will be sending out the book list tomorrow to everyone who has registered. And please go ahead and send that list to all of your friends. We're happy to let people know the books that we think are really, really good gift givers.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.